And good afternoon from UK Column Live here in Plymouth. And I'm in the studio this afternoon with Mike Robinson. We're going to focus in our half hour with you today on the subject of civil liberties. And we feel it particularly important to start highlighting some of the smaller stories which are appearing in the press, but which in reality have a much greater significance. And of course, what we're going to be talking about this afternoon should be seen against the background of Roger Hayes, who remains in Liverpool prison, having been put through a totally unlawful court process which saw him denied all of his basic rights, including the ability to come in front of a jury, also to have legal representation with him, and of course there were no public or press available at the time either. I can also tell you in this incredible case, because really it means that any of us now could simply be picked up by the police and go through a secret court process and then be incarcerated in prison. But I can also tell you that Wirral Council, that the week before last held a hearing, failed to notify Roger of that hearing. So Roger didn't attend the case. Well, he couldn't because he didn't know the hearing was taking place. But within the hearing, a judge issued a bench warrant for Roger's arrest. So we're not just dealing with one incident of proper due process failing or being deliberately corrupted. In Roger Hayes' case, there's two separate court cases where due process has been fraudulent. And of course the precedent for this, as I say, could affect all of us. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to hand you over to Mike, who's going to have a little bit of a look at the BBC, which is reporting on predictive CCTV. Over to you, Mike.
Well, it's not just the BBC. The BBC's been talking about this for a few years now. There's an article in the BBC from 2009 that's talking about CCTV on buses being able to predict behaviour on the bus. So it needs to be seen in terms of the whole behavioural change, behavioural units within the government, I think. Right. What was particularly interesting from last week's coverage of it is that they're now talking about not just buses but all CCTV being able to predict behaviour. So you would look at riots, you would look at behaviour of people and try to work out, is there going to be a riot or is there going to be an assault? It's very much like the film Minority Report, if you remember that, where they're arresting people before the crime has even taken place. Yeah. And the reason that I sort of got interested in this today was because another article has appeared in the press, this time on the Register website, talking about predicting the types of behaviours and the types of people based on what they post on Twitter.
Right.
And what the Register is saying is that a small group of volunteers called the Online Privacy Foundation is using a piece of software called Kaggle to follow people's behaviour on Twitter, and they're actually looking to identify things like psychopathic behaviour, narcissism, Machiavellianism. And I think this is quite interesting, isn't it, that they're particularly focusing on those types of behaviours when you and Thomas Sheridan and others are talking about the psychopathic behaviour of some of the people that are running this country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And isn't it interesting that they're trying to find more psychopaths?
Yeah. Well, of course they're not. What they're trying to do, in my opinion, is label us as the psychopaths. So anybody who's attempting to challenge the system is really going to be on the receiving end of this. But for us to be analysed psychologically by a computer is a very interesting concept.
So we've got people being analysed psychologically by a computer, and then the BBC report from last week was talking about a huge new project to analyse people's behaviour by computers. So, so instead of CCTV centres where individuals are, human beings are looking at cameras and looking for particular behaviours, they're moving towards a model where computers look at the behaviour of a scene, of people in a scene, and try to predict what the next behaviour is going to be. And they've been doing this in the laboratory for quite a long time, and there seems to be a definite trend towards this behavioural. Yeah.
What's very interesting with this is that Thomas Sheridan, who's been researching psychopaths and all about psychopaths for some time, and as you say, has been looking at psychopaths in positions of power. But one of the things that he said at a recent talk in London was that there was a psychiatrist in the audience who came to speak to him afterwards, and that gentleman said that he was delighted that Thomas Sheridan was beginning to talk and speak out about psychopaths in positions of power, because it was becoming evident within the psychiatric profession that if you dared to start really talking about this subject, you weren't going to have your job for much longer. So what we're seeing is that the psychopaths have moved into government, they've moved into key positions in the civil service, for example, and these people, of course, who do not have any normal human emotion, they don't feel guilt, they don't worry about what they're doing, but they're now starting to analyse the bulk of the population as if there's something wrong with us. 1984.
I would like to know what qualifies them to do that.
Well, what we really need is listeners and viewers to actually start asking the question, because if we go through these subjects, and some of them for some people are going to be quite scary, the big question is, what do we do about this? And the UK column is going to keep giving one simple answer in particular, and that is talk about it. Start to alert friends and family about it, because what we need are more whistleblowers and people within the system to come forward and tell us what's going on.
That sort of policy of watching people's behaviour seems to be reflected in an article that was in the Daily Mail. Was that at the weekend?
Could be
the Kerslake one.
Oh, the Kerslake one. Well, of course. Okay, we can lead into this one. I'll just hold the article up. This is the Saturday Daily Mail, and it's got a big story about our top civil servant, Sir Bob Kerslake. And what's interesting is the article is describing how he's he's uncovered plans. Which is to get thousands of civil servants to actually use Facebook at work as part of their job in order to see what the public are thinking and doing. So remembering what Mike's just mentioned here, we've now got this gentleman, Bob Kerslake, who has got unbelievable power. He's in control of the civil service. He's working very closely with Francis Maude and the Cabinet Office Leadership Committee, which is looking and driving the agenda for using applied psychology to affect the way we think and act. And now Sir Bob Kerslake is going to use the social media system to keep even more detailed checks on us. Now, significantly, the Daily Mail describes the idea as totally mad, but this is a very common thing, that whenever a very dangerous idea is put forward, instead of calling it dangerous and pointing out how dangerous it really is, it's dismissed as crazy or ridiculous or mad. And I have to say, I think that to let Sir Bob Kerslake loose on this type of project is very dangerous indeed. We've now got computers monitoring our psychology. We've got a government programme which the UK column exposed and has analysed in detail, using applied psychology to change our values and beliefs, and we don't even know it's been done. And now here we are going to use our own civil service to spy on us. we probably should make a special reference to Sir Bob Kerslake, because his previous job was the chief executive of Sheffield City Council, and during the time that he was in post, in the background was the most amazing fraud going on with very, very large amounts of public money. Now this was not uncommon within other cities, and indeed we've seen similar misuse of public funds in Plymouth, but it was also going on in Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow and London. But what is significant with the Sheffield case is that a massive effort was undertaken with the assistance of Mr. Bob Kerslake to help suppress reporting of what was actually taking place. And I can tell viewers and listeners today that the fraud was so great that eventually OLAF, which is the European Union's own fraud team, was actually brought in supposedly to help clean this up. But what happened in reality was that it was covered up. And on our show on Thursday, which will be from 2 till 4. Sorry, from 2 till 4 o'clock. We are going to have an expert from the Sheffield area to tell us more about what's been happening. We're watching the screens here with interest because it looks as though one of our main computers has just gone down. But we think the broadcast is going out okay at the moment. So what we'd like to say to viewers is we need to start putting these pieces of the jigsaw together. We've got a government that has built an applied psychology system. We know that millions, tens of millions of pounds have been spent on this system. We know that the people who are devising the programme are working very closely with the top tier of the Tory party and Francis Maude in particular. We know that the political charity Common Purpose is involved because they have been campaigning inside the Cabinet Office system to win the contract to train the top 200 civil servants in their own agenda, of course. And now we can see Sir Bob Kerslake fully amongst this programme, where we are now going to be using people to spy on the public. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, and so Kerslake has taken the job of Gus O'Donnell, and it was Gus O'Donnell that set up this, or at least began the process of setting up this behavioural change scheme within government. So he's clearly just following on that agenda as quickly as he possibly can. Yeah,
what we're seeing here is that these key people are elevated through the system. Everywhere we follow them, if we look at their track record, we find that things have gone wrong, there have been problems, there have been cover-up, there's been fraud. And what the UK column has been saying now for some years is that it's important for us to recognise that this is not accidental, this is not incompetence. What we're actually seeing is key people being moved into positions of power in order to create the breakdown and the chaos. And even this weekend, talking to just people locally, I was amazed at how many people were sort of saying, we just do not understand what's happening at the moment. It's chaos, there's madness around us. And I was gently saying to them, don't look at it from this angle, come in at the fact that this breakdown is being created and engineered. And if we follow it through the system, we see key individuals who are promoted out of one job where they failed, they're then promoted into another job to fail again. This is not accidental. We'll watch this space basically.
Yes, it's
tune in.
I think.
Yeah, tune in on Thursday, where we will be looking in detail at the fraud and corruption that's occurred in Sheffield.
Okay, so I think the next story that we wanted to cover was another child stealing story.
Well, there's actually two that I'm going to mention because there's another case which is going on in Ireland at the moment. But the one that came to our attention this morning was to do with a lady called Tony MacLeod. And at the moment, it appears that the local social services are taking an interest in her unborn child because this lady has supported the English Defence League. Now, the UK column will say at this stage that we are not supporters in any way of the English Defence League. What we are interested in here is the fact that we now have social services once again taking an interest in an unborn child, but they are taking an interest because of the actual views, you could say the political views, of the mother. And this particular case has quite rightly been picked up by the Liberal Democrat MP John Hemming, who regards it as outrageous because it would indicate that we're now heading towards the situation where we can have our children taken away from us because of our political views. What Mr. Hemmings has said is that despite his loathing for the English Defence League, he has been prepared to raise this lady's case in the Commons, and he's also specifically contrasted her treatment with that of the extremist Islamic cleric Abu Qatada, who was allowed to remain with his children when he was briefly remanded on bail earlier this year, as the government tried to deport him. And what Mr. Hemming says, and I think is an extremely good point, is that he would like to ask a question as to why Abu Qatada is allowed to radicalise his own children, but the state won't take the chance of allowing Tony McLeod to look after her baby. So this again is an indication at the moment of how the state is gradually assuming more and more powers, which gives it direct control over our lives. I have said on numerous occasions, and we are constantly pushing this out over the internet at the moment, that your child can be taken, and children are being taken, within courts which are absolutely secret to the public. The public are not present, a jury is not present, the press are not present, and even when members of the public go in to assist families who are trying to fight this draconian behaviour by children's services, the judges are very happy to warn that if we dare report what takes place in the secret family courts, that we will be put in prison. And of course we now know from Roger Hayes that the judges are not worried about juries being present or due process, because they simply make the law up as they go along. What is actually now starting to emerge in Britain, the best description is a Stasi state or a Soviet state. You can take your pick, but what we are clearly seeing is that democracy is really not even being undermined, it's being dismantled, and we are seeing a state which is grabbing more and more powers. So the case of Tony McLeod, I hope that viewers out there will do their own research and see what's going on, but it isn't a question of a woman with extremist views. This is a question of, can we protect our own children now from the state? The second case I'd like to just mention is the fact that we have a very brave lady at the moment in Ireland. Once again, she's had to run from the so-called justice system in Great Britain in order to try and protect her children. Why are Buckingham Social Services so interested in her children? The simple answer is because this lady has been taking court cases, is in litigation against Thames Valley Police. And it is extremely interesting that, following on from the UK column's exposure of how sexual abuse, physical abuse, racial abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College has been suppressed and covered up with the help and assistance of Thames Valley Police, that we now have another case coming in a different direction where the same accusations are being put against Thames Valley Police. And in the case of the mother who's in Ireland at the moment, she is talking about forensic medical evidence for a serious sexual assault, which required her to be hospitalised for 4 days. Thames Valley Police interfered with the process of collecting that forensic medical evidence. And she has now been able to prove part of the case through the system, but of course has had to get through the block of the IPCC, Independent Police Complaints Commission, who many people would say simply side with the police. So I'm going to leave it there with those 2 cases, but we have to say that what we are watching is the state now coming for people's children if the state doesn't agree with our political views. It's really quite remarkable.
Okay.
I wonder whether we should just briefly mention that we spoke to Leanne Smith this morning. I'm sure many viewers out there will have seen the recent publicity given to the case of Leanne Smith, the mother who killed her 2 children in Spain. There's been a huge amount of press reporting, particularly by the Daily Mail, but also the Mirror recently. And the UK column has written on the case of Leanne Smith, and we've also previously written on the case of Martin Smith. And our stance on this is, whilst we are very, very sad at the traumatic events that took place in Spain, and we realise that the death of those 2 children was a terrible crime, we believe it is also important that the full truth of the story about the Smith family comes out, and that the full facts about the respective court cases come out. Now, one issue which has not been properly dealt with in any of the mainstream media is the fact that DNA evidence was produced at the trial of Martin Smith, and the DNA evidence was used to try and allege that Leanne's 2 younger children, who subsequently tragically died, that those 2 children were not Martin Smith's children. However, the UK column can factually report that at the time that Martin Smith's trial was occurring in Manchester, both the prosecution and the defence teams knew that the DNA evidence was totally flawed and mistaken. They were aware of that, but this issue was not brought forward into the court. And why is this DNA evidence so critical? It is critical because, of course, Martin Smith was accused of rape and sexual abuse without any form of protective measures over a long period of time. So our focus is very much on due process, and we are going to...
Sorry, that wasn't just clear. What did you mean by protective measures?
Well, effectively, Martin Smith was accused of rape without using any form of contraception.
Yes.
And
so, in other words, they feel the need to publicly imply that he is not capable of having children.
Yes. And this key issue, as I say, was known at the court case, but was not presented by either the prosecution or the defence. And we also know that the mainstream press are at least aware of irregularities over the DNA evidence, but they refuse to investigate and report accurately. And the UK column says, in any case, if we do not really get to the bottom of what the truth is, then we are not seeing justice in this country. So the UK column is going to stick with the Leanne Smith story, and we're going to do it on the basis that the mainstream press in particular has reported in a sensationalist way on one hand, but they failed to do their proper investigation on the other hand. The other thing which is significant for us as the UK column is we have, in the last couple of weeks, we've emailed and called particularly the reporters at the Daily Mail in order to discuss what they have been reporting and to try and get across information that we know, and we've been met with a wall of silence. So we say to viewers and listeners, the silence says it all. There is something that occurred in the Martin Smith, Leanne Smith case, which the mainstream press are either frightened of or they're being warned off reporting. I think it's as simple as that. We have been in contact with Leanne Smith for 2 years. We received a call from her this morning, which further evidence emerged that procedures were not followed properly, and we are going to report to viewers and listeners on a regular basis on this case. Anything to add on that, Mike?
No.
That's about it. Okay. One other little thing that's appeared in the press today, which I think fits in very nicely with our theme of the loss of civil liberties, is the fact that yet more local officials are being given powers, and these could range from parking attendants to parks attendants. So we're seeing a steady increase in the number of people employed in the public sector who are being given powers to, in particular, impose on-the-spot fines. And we can say with confidence that this process of issuing on-the-spot fines is totally in breach of common law, which gives us our basic protections. And also it mirrors the procedure that was followed in the lead up to the Nazi Party installing itself in Germany, where there was a slow drip of more powers to local officials. So when you pull out these relatively small articles from the mainstream press, we use them as pieces in a jigsaw. When we start to put that jigsaw together, we are surely seeing that there is a major attack on our civil liberties. So do look out for that article. I think we've got a couple of minutes to go.
Well,
I've got...
yeah, I mean, I had something else to talk about, but we'll talk about that. We'll just talk about that in tomorrow's show.
Well, I can mention that briefly. Just flag that one up because we can come back to it.
Okay. Well, what I want to talk about is this business of it, our collapsing infrastructure. We had obviously we've just had another deluge and more flooding. We've had the M4 junction at Heathrow Airport closed. Yep. You know, you and I drive quite a lot, and Spaghetti Junction is, you can see it collapsing as we every time we go up there. It seems to be in worse condition. So you know, I just want to have a chat about you know, our collapsing infrastructure, what it means for us, and actually the opportunities that it offers us for getting out of the economic mess that we're in at the moment. Okay, well we will come back to that in the next report. I just wanted to do a little bit of advertising in the show today. So on the 21st of July, this is the advert from the latest UK column edition, but on the 21st of July in Dunstable, we've been working with a sovereign independent UK team to put on a, we think it's quite a unique programme of talks and music. It's an all-day event. You can find details online at the UK column, but the aim is to get information across in those talks on some quite serious subjects, but on the other hand to balance it by having some folky type music in order to have some fun as well. So please have a look at that, and if you can attend, or if you can't, perhaps you'd mention it to friends and family. We would love to have you along on the 21st of July. Okay, so as Brian pointed out, we've lost the control of the system from here, so right. I'm going to have to get up and switch it off, but if you want to say goodbye, or
I will do that. We've been getting good feedback on the show, and one of the things that people have said to us is don't get too professional, because if it starts heading towards the BBC, people are going to switch off. So we do have a few technical problems from time to time, but bear with us. We're amateurs trying to be as professional as we can. Thanks for joining us with UK Column Live. Goodbye.